So my name is Anna. I was presented before, if anyone saw me, and he's Stuart.
Hey.
We're talking about MapTCHA, which is a CAPTCHA, and there is the play with the matcha. So that's what the symbol is from, okay? If you wonder, there's a cup and there is the tea and everything together, okay? That's it, so everything is green in this one because of the matcha latte tea, okay? That's it, Stuart. No, you start.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about this project. We started it up about a year ago, I think. We've been really in the prototyping stage. So this is a talk which is to tell you about what we've done, but also to invite people to come and work with us to kind of move this forward as well, because it's a project with a few of us working on it, but not enough resources. So we're going to talk a little bit about where this came from, how it works, where we are, and the help we need to kind of move this forward. So yeah, CAPTCHAs, everybody in this room knows what a CAPTCHA is, right? Probably. They're the annoying things that pop up 12 times a day on your computer to ask you to verify that you're a human and not an AI bot. They're everywhere on the internet, and they've taken a lot of forms over the years. So it started out, with just tasks to prove that you were human. People quickly realized that there was kind of benefit in that you could get people to do some useful work while they were proving they were human as well. And they've evolved a lot over the years. So you'll have seen these happening across the board. So we've got things like typing out the text that's got lines through it or noise. There's the kind of updated Google versions of these CAPTCHAs, which sometimes break and give you an undefined, that ask you to click all the traffic lights, which you're never quite sure whether the traffic lights in the corner or not is meant to be clicked. And then we've also got the sort of the more modern ones, which don't ask you to do anything, but kind of just allow you to tick a box. And those are using kind of a lot of fingerprinting technology to figure out if you are actually a person or not. And so there's a wide range of these that have gone across the board.
Sorry, that one is real. I got it sent from a friend that knows how to do CAPTCHA stuff. So it arrives to the point to get to this, right? And the last one is this is like a chronology of what the evolution of the CAPTCHAs, right? Okay.
Yeah, and so it's been an interesting evolution, and there's probably some new ones that you've seen over the past little while as well. So with the increased use of AI to scrape the internet, the increased need for AI to scrape the internet, to produce content, to train them, we're seeing kind of a lot more bots really cripple various different websites. I think the OSM community had some of this as well, where the bots are just coming in and trying to gobble up all the content, which crashes the servers of people who don't have a lot of resources or a lot of servers running to kind of handle that load. And so, there's kind of these big companies using them to collect data, but also there's the small guys who are trying to fight back against this. And this is a really interesting project, I haven't seen it, called Nubis, which is trying to stop the AI bots from scraping small organization websites. Basically what it does is it asks the browser asks whoever's browsing when they come to the website to just solve a little math problem. And the math problem takes long enough that it's prohibitively expensive from bots trying to scrape everything. But for your own browser, it just kind of gives you a second or two before the website loads. And so there's a whole range of different approaches to these. The vast majority of the internet uses CAPTCHAs that are provided by a company, proprietary CAPTCHAs. So you'll see Google ones everywhere. You'll see some other providers kind of providing these. And that's usually because it's just very easy to drop these CAPTCHAs into a website and have them work. So they essentially just will have a couple of lines of code, you throw it in there, and then it uses the company's infrastructure to then verify that somebody is human or not. But there's a couple of issues with that. The first is that there's a lack of transparency and control. These are usually closed source by nature. The algorithms and code that are used to produce them are not publicly available, meaning we can't really verify or audit how that data is handled or how the decisions are made. There's a lack of accountability because, again, the inner workings are opaque. And we can't really see whether or not it's adhering to best security practices or data collection. And then there's vendor lock-in as well. So often these sites will lock into their ecosystem by using their CAPTCHA. The second issue is data privacy and surveillance based. So a lot of these, like reCAPTCHA, they collect extensive behavioral data about you, your mouse movements, your clicks, your browsing history, your cookies, to assess whether you're human or not. They also opt you into cross-site data collection. So this is like then bringing you into kind of the wider tracking network of Google and their affiliates across the web, just by having that capture on the website. So even if the website itself is not doing any cross-domain tracking, then the inclusion of the CAPTCHA will make that happen, unfortunately. And then there's a lack of consent clarity. So it's very hard to opt out of these things. If you want to use that service, you kind of are stuck doing the work for the CAPTCHA. And then the final is the one that we're all maybe a bit more familiar with, which is some of these captures are being used to label training data for large organizations that then see the benefit of that. So Google, et cetera, for a period of time, we're using a lot of this to label vision data for like AIs for doing computer vision. And so there's an unequal value exchange there. You don't really get anything back for that. And you're having to do that work to just access a resource that you should be able to access anyway. And then the blending of these is kind of like a whole bunch of issues. So the point is, we don't want to use these. Like for many different reasons, we don't want to use a CAPTCHA that's being hosted by somebody else. Thankfully, there's been a movement towards providing open source CAPTCHAs. So these are ones that you can host yourself, use yourself, can host on behalf of your users. You can configure them, control them, and they provide the same functionality, but without opting into an ecosystem from a company like Google, or kind of like, or having something on your website that is not transparent and visible and able to be understood. There's two that I'm mentioning here. There's probably more out there, but there's CAPTCHA and CAPTCHA, which I almost pronounced wrong. There are good places to start if you're looking for some open source tooling here.
There was an attempt also in the some community to build this. Was done 12 years ago. So when we started talking about it, somebody reached out on Mastodon saying, yeah, somebody tried already in the past to do that. Though the way it was working was like, the technology evolved at the time. At the time, they were still using those. Basically, they were assigning images and connecting them with the same system of the words, like the old system, like recognizing words, right? That was the first CAPTCHA possible, and it was trying to connect the image and the wording. That's my understanding. And basically, you would write the words if you would write the words that is connected with the image that you think is correct, and not the other ones. Like you could choose. So basically, it was a bit complicated, and it didn't manage to fly off. And anyways, since then, computer vision kicked in, and what we're trying to do here now to do something similar, but without the words and only using computer vision, so object detection, and we're gonna go more in detail about that. So what we're trying to do now, basically, with this CAPTCHA. This new CAPTCHA. We want to build something that can reliably tell the difference between a human and a bot. So that's one of the goals. And at the same time, we can generate good validation data for improving models and eventually suggest for mapping in OSM. So how do we see that? Because the data that we started to use is data that comes from FAIR. This is the tool which I talked about before as well. It was presented yesterday by Emmanuel. Is a tool from HOT, which does building detection from satellite imagery. So when I presented this stuff at Nairobi, someone in the crowd thought, well, that could be a good data input for some CAPTCHA for satellite imagery. So that's what we started from. We launched it on Mastodon. We did our prototype, and then I wrote this post on Mastodon. It's not the date. It was in January, because it was together with FOSDEM. Was at the end of January, and we gave people 1 week to run the test, and actually we got a lot of response, but we're going to see that later. So that's the website.
Yeah, so the first phase of this project was really sort of asking this question of like, could we build a useful CAPTCHA for the FAIR HOT community to kind of help identify bad data that could then help with retraining the models, and sort of, act as a CAPTCHA as well. Like, so actually make that distinction between bots and humans. So we wanted to verify those two things before we kind of invested too much more time in this. So we built this little prototype. It's very simple. It lives on the web. You can go and try it out just now and play around with it. And we were basically loading in data that we already kind of knew the answer for to try and see whether or not people, A, would do this, B, find it like interesting. C, would be able to actually do the data task in a short period of time. And D, give us good results, essentially. So we were testing kind of the first part of this, which is can we get useful data out of it? And we're still to kind of test is this an effective deterrent for bots, essentially, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. We built the prototype using open source tools, so we use web components for the front end, so this is something that can be easily embeddable across many different projects. And then we have a very simple backend right now using Supabase to kind of really sort of see, just to go hold the data and to provide the data to the front end. And so the sketch of how this works is if we had a website using MapTCHA for verification, it loads up a little widget on there. It sends a request to our server for images. That then the server then looks through the database we have of images which are pending and sends a small selection of those back again. The users interact with the interface, which we'll show in a second, and those answers get sent back to the server, which then looks to see if that's sufficient to tell whether they're a human or a bot, and sends the result back to the front end to then allow the person to log in or use the website. We were interested in trying 2 different interaction models for the CAPTCHA based upon just a couple of different UX designs. So the second one, the grid one, is very similar to what you see in something like a Google CAPTCHA, where you're asked to select a number of images. And basically what we were doing is a little bit hard to see in the projector here just now because the light's a bit bright, but we were showing the fair images with red outlines on the top of buildings, and we were asking people to select the images where they thought the building outline and the detected outline were the same and correct. And so you'd basically just go in, select a few of those, and then hit submit, and then that would take you to the next stage. We'll show you in a second, yeah. The swiping interface was meant to be quicker and easier and give a larger image, where it's very much just like a particular dating application where you sort of swipe right if that looks correct, and if you swipe left if it's not, and then you go through 8 or 9 of those, and that builds up a record to see whether you're human or not. And so you can see the swiping interface looks a little bit like this. You can try it out on your phones if you want to afterwards, where you can just very quickly validate a bunch of these images, and then you use the buttons if you don't want to swipe, and then sort of get data back again. The grid interface was a little bit more like a traditional CAPTCHA, where you kind of come in, click a few of these that you think are correct, and then move on to the next screen. And the images we're showing here are a combination of false positives, true positives, false negatives, and true negatives. So we basically know the labels for each one of those. So places where we know there's a building, the algorithms correctly detected the building. Places where you know there's a building and the algorithm hasn't detected it. Places where there is no building and the algorithm has hallucinated a building, and one where there is no building and there's no building being detected. And that way we were able to bring up,
that in more detail, I think.
Bring up some content there.
That's sorry.
No, go
ahead. After we launched the test, we presented the results at FOSDEM, and we got 2 weeks time we got surprising high number of users. I mean, we didn't expect that, which there were like 400 images and almost 800 people clicked. A few of these completed a survey that we had, and we had more than 20,000 clicks, and eventually it made it also to the first page of Hacker News. So basically it got a lot of traction. These apparently people were really enthusiastic because of the frustration that Lisa was talking about, probably. Like everybody who is already doing this every day, mapping around, and I mean, why not to give my labor to something more useful than Google, right? So we got feedback from the surveys, from the presentation of FOSDEM, and what we understood is that we had to work more on the data part, so what is needed in terms of the substance, and what is needed in terms of tools. So on the left, so we have we got feedback on the accessibility because we chose the red outlines, and there were a lot of people speaking about visual impairment, which is a general problem for CAPTCHA. In general, there is a possibility also of audio, but it's complicated to do for translation. Then the question wasn't really clear. I'm gonna go through to this a bit more in details, and the data in particular. I mean, I'm gonna show what was the problem with the data that we chose. And in terms of backend, we still need to work on a callback service to check a user's answers, determine if they're human, and inform the service. And for the bot deterrence, also we need to do rigorous testing on how much of a deterrent this is to bots. And the production phase, we need still to eventually to integrate with OSM and to be for it to be able to be used in other different platforms. So what I was mentioning about the data before, so what I was trying to say still before is that we got data for which we know, so the true positives are data which were supposed to be buildings and they were detected as buildings on and there are all the possible other cases, false positive, false negatives, and true negatives, right? So the true negatives is clear that it shouldn't be a building, while here a building is not detected, should have been detected. So these are all the possible cases, and the data labels. So we do know the answer, which actually people know about, if the people agree or not. So the question, which wasn't very clear for many users, is the right shape correctly outlining a building? So we expected this type of answers in terms of yes or no. And as a matter of fact, we got user response. I mean, this is the ratio of images, so most of them were true positive. But as a matter of fact, so yeah, we have less cases for false positive, false negatives. But most of the people agreed mainly on these two cases. So that was interesting. Because as a matter of fact, in most of the cases for CAPTCHA, even if the label is wrong, if the people agree on that, I trust more the people than the labels, right? Because that's what we want to know, to see is when people agree on something, that must be correct somehow. Because that's how we use the human validation. So anyways, this is a reflection that we need to work on and still try to understand how to work out with those. So what I'm showing here is MapSwipe, because this is the alternative we found to use instead of FAIR. MapSwipe usually is known for this type of it helps to filter out images which are relevant for for mapping. So yeah, I'm showing it again. So when you can filter out where in this case there is buildings, actually, so this is called the find features type of project in MapSwipe. Well, actually, what we could interface with either the validate footprints or assess image and view street images, because we could get images from there where there is this type of detection and import them to MapTCHA. So yeah, so that's the type of data we could use, probably from MapSwipe. And we are in conversation with Highgate about how to use that, and probably it's gonna go into another project which is called FairSwipe, which tries already to integrate data from FAIR and brings it to MapSwipe. And in that case, we would have just, inside the pipeline, would just be another user from the API to the ending results. So that's the idea. So that would solve for us more or less all the left part, because we would use what's already built in from MapSwipe, and we would just import the same type of data, and a lot of the UI, UX is already done from MapSwipe, basically. What we still want to work on is all this right part. And so the question we're trying always to find people who want to get involved. These are people who have been into the project until now. So it's me, Bastian, who is in Argentina. This is Guillaume. Some of you might know him from OSM, and that's Stuart, and that's Ollie from Highgate. And yeah, that's it. This is a bit of that's our chat in Elements, if you want to join. Yeah, Matrix, sorry. And yeah, happy to hear feedback from people, and happy to hear from anyone wants to have ideas about how to improve it or to work on it.
Cool.
Yeah.
What do you want to do for 8.5 minutes? Do you want to ask questions?
Questions sound good. Yeah.
Questions? Put your hands up and these guys can choose. Anyone? Here we go. So a microphone, or do I just? No, I think
Yes, use yell.
just say loudly so the panel can pick you up.
We can repeat it. Yeah.
Repeat the question.
So if you're fundamentally working off of open data and relying on there being like false positives and true positives, etc., could bots not basically look up the open data set and just find out what the answers are headed?
The way that we'd be delivering the images and the data to the front end would have no geographic information. It would just be images with the outlines. And so unless they're able to kind of do that quite expensive, reverse image lookup and then find it and then bring the data out, we think that's, sorry, repeating the question. The question was, if we're using open data, I guess, and urban data within OpenStreetMap, couldn't bots just go and look up the answer to see whether or not, to get it right or not? And I guess the reply to that is, yeah, we don't include much identifying information when we send the data down, and so you would need to kind of do some quite hefty image lookup searches, which would be prohibitive, I think, for most bots trying to do this at scale. And the other nice advantage of this is, like, at least for the first little while, because this will be on a very small number of websites, people won't be creating generic bots to do it. Most of the bots that are out there try to attack the large CAPTCHAs, and so it would give us a bit of time to try and detect attacks like that and be able to respond to them.
Any more?
So if I understand correctly, this is a separate application. Is there any way that you could like hijack current CAPTCHAs and insert the map ones into it?
Unfortunately, no. I think the system, the way that these things are set up, they're pretty secure because they have to be. If there's anybody in the audience, so the question was, could we hijack existing CAPTCHAs and insert this in there? If there's,
It's way more interesting and helpful than those ones.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So if anybody in here is like a very, very good hacker and can help us with that, we'll be very open to it, but I think it's going to be quite hard to do.
If you have a website, you can choose which one to
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I know, but I want to hijack.
Nicola, that's why we found out those alternative open source options, but it's a hard system to build, and I mean, we have limited capacity and knowledge, so that's why I always looking for people. But it has traction, like people really like it. Apparently, whomever you say to, they're just happy. And then what we did was not perfect or working yet, so whoever wants to join is more than.
Find us in the pub later, and we'll start the MapTCHA Black Ops team to do that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find from the test you did that the images are too small?
Yeah.
That I'm just trying to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I know what I'm doing and I can't tell.
Yeah.
From the computer, it looks bigger.
Where you going for the single image on the MapTCHA of the
Yeah.
white style.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the issues. Like because the data we had was these tiles was constrained on the data I had for my research on ramp on FAIR. Then it was constrained on that. But if we get from MapSwipe, you manage to zoom more and we have a single building and center on the building, which is much better data. So that will solve that issue. Yeah.
This is why we tried both of them in the initial test, and we were doing an EB split. So people, when they came to the application, were getting sent to one of either the grid option or the swipe option, so that we could see whether there was differences there. Surprisingly, there was actually, I think perhaps because of the large size of the images, there was some difference in how good people were at doing it across those two different interfaces, and we got some feedback back around that as well. So I think there's improvements to be made there from the UX point of view, for sure.
Yeah, I have a website that's entirely swamped by bots, so one of these solutions would be great. So,
Yeah.
Help you guys. And if I could just one of the others, that's easier.
I mean, for now, yeah, for sure. And then once we get this up and running, we can switch it out. Yeah. I would say the other thing is we were starting with the FAIR kind of use case and the sort of outline of buildings use case. But if there are other validation tasks that we think could be potentially useful, we can bring those onto the platform as well. And one of the nice things about working with MapSwipe is that they have a infrastructure for kind of validating things, so we can get those kind of test cases that we'll use to prove whether somebody's a bot, and then also the others. Yeah, exactly. So we're working with them to bring that in and create a new project on there that will help do this.
And it might be an easier question, like, is there a building in this image rather than is this the right outline, right? And I think for the novices, that's probably more reliable.
Yeah. Well, this is the other big question we have, and this is, again, something we'd love help from in the room, is that the assumption we're making is that this is going to be hard for bots because the original machine learning task that was given to the bots, given to the AI, which is to outline the buildings, they've failed, right? That's the whole point, is that they failed, so they're not reliable at doing it. But one of the things we realized in the process of doing this is the task of, is this outline correct, is different from create the outline in the first place. And so it may be that it is relatively straightforward to create computer vision algorithms to break something like this, but if somebody does that, then that algorithm's actually great at verifying the data as well. So it almost gives us a solution to the problem of verifying the FAIR data if somebody creates something that can actually beat this CAPTCHA, which is a nice kind of win-win, which is fun.
One more? 3 minutes? One more?
Yeah.
Anyone?
I mean, if this thing would exist and would be functional, would you prefer this rather than other things? That's my question to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one thumbs up.
Where do I send people?
Yeah, that's an easy.
Obviously, this is great.
That's an easy way.
Cool.
In fact, we probably, I mean, the thing with the test we did, we probably had a biased population because we were sending over to friends and people which are already interested in the geospatial mapping. The question is that if that's easy for general people to see. I think so. Like mapping buildings from.
I don't think it's any harder than the stupid crossings and buses and.
God no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is not Google. That's
Yeah.
It's just better. What does it mean to be human?
That's definitely a pub question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.